Hey, this is Ryan Bloom. On today's episode of the Fireside Chat, we'll be speaking with Daniel Alexander and Richard Loring of Domos Coliving. I'll be asking them questions about their philosophy on the new mixed-use multifamily real estate projects that they're involved in, how they're seeing the need for both physical space but the experiences that go around them, and the types of things they are offering future homeowners that are attracting them to their projects. It's a really interesting discussion on a subject that I happen to love. These are the people who are making projects for the future attainable and accessible to all. Enjoy. I've been really looking forward to this discussion. And before, a lot of people don't know this, before founding Urban Bonfire, I spent 7 years working in the planning of mixed-use real estate for a company based in Montreal and traveled around the United States and the Caribbean, working on the activation of downtowns, main streets, working with cities like Rockford, Illinois, working at Habersham in South Carolina, working in the Cayman Islands, and really trying to understand, and in reading your profile, trying to understand what the 21st century person wants to live in. What are the experiences beyond just physical walls and bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens? What are the experiences they are seeking that truly defines place? And a lot of people and a lot of companies in their marketing talk about living. And I noted that you talk about co-living in yours. And I noted that minor shift. And I wanted to understand from you philosophically, where do you see this and what drives you in terms of trying to create this place that is so much more than just the home for your customer of the future?
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it. I mean, place is different for everybody, all demographics, all phases of life. I mean, you have people that are forming households, and most of those households that are forming are in a certain, price point, and which creates a lot of, upward pressure on demand for place. And then you have people that are, headed up the income spectrum, and some people are retired, and and maybe getting back into it part-time. I mean, place means so much to so many different people. At the same time, we have this, I'd like to call it a temporary, moment in time here, the pandemic, that, place is now the center of the earth or the universe, basically. I mean, our home is we're in our homes now more than I was ever in my home at any given time. You work there, you sleep there, you do everything there, and you barely go out because of what's happening. So, I mean, it's, you consider all that and you go, what are the drivers to people, what motivates people? So let's put a pin in the pandemic and just talk about place in general and urbanization, from an urban planning perspective, which, you mentioned earlier on in the conversation. You see this movement out of the gateway cities into more economically friendly markets, let's just say. Places like you see people leaving Los Angeles and New York to the world to move to places in the Midwest, parts of Texas, all over the Southeast. I mean, we're based here in Atlanta. I think they've finally reached 7 million people here. I mean, this place is growing like gangbusters. You see a lot of the Fortune 500 companies here. You see the tech boom going on. You got all the colleges right at downtown, state capital, biggest airport, busiest airport in the world. I mean, and they built another lane. So, you see all these things coming and all these drivers, and you go, place. That word is it just means so much to everybody. Pick your demographic. For us, we're focusing on cause and effect of the lack of attainable housing. What I mean is when you talk about place and urbanization and people living more in the urban core, you see a lot of this Class A multifamily product coming online, whether it be condo, whether it be apartment communities or high rises, and that is being delivered into the high end of the renter spectrum. This renter spectrum, most of the households are forming right dead smack in the middle, and you have most of the deliveries servicing that top 5-10%. And so that causes displacement. People no longer can live in the areas that they work, which they would prefer to live nearby the area within 5 miles, at the very least 5 or 10 miles, but some even 1 mile away. But it makes it difficult for people to live in the places where they work. And so the way we see it is we want to stem that tide of displacing people, and we want to help inject mass amounts of attainable and affordable, affordable housing into the housing supply. That is our goal. And co-living is just one way of doing that, one way of many solutions of doing that. So if you have I'm sorry about the long-winded, detailed answer, but but if you have let's say a theoretical 100 unit building, and you can offer 10 or 15 co-living units, studios, 10 or 20 studios, 30 or 40 one bedrooms, you see where I'm going, in 2s and 3s, you have this complete mix where there's affordability, natural affordability because of shared space. Great equal amenities, so you're not discounting the experience that like you mentioned before. And those folks are able now to live in the urban core, near jobs, near amenities, near social opportunities, be plugged in, economically mobile, and things like that. And so that is the goal of Domos, to inject that into the housing supply.
Interesting you mentioned that, and I'd like your take on this. In my past life and in my research, I studied and learned recently that between 1950 and 2050, the percentage of people on a worldwide basis, not just US, but in the world, who lived in urban versus rural settings will have inverted itself. Where
Yes.
1950, 25% of the world's population urban, by 2050, 75%. I looked just the other day at the US, and 86% of the US population lives in what's considered urban.
Yeah.
In studying this, I realized, and I think one of the big drivers is that people today are, to your earlier point, defining where I live very differently from just the confines of a home based on how many bed, how many bath, how many square feet, versus on overall lifestyle and experience. So and I'll use my mom as a great example. My mom is, 74 this year. Would it be the perfect person to sort of spend the winters in, if she played golf, Arizona, and might want to be on a golf course, yet would be much happier living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in 900 square feet, because her yoga club was down the street and she could go to the farmer's market, and she had a book club are you seeing tremendous shift in the demand of the consumer, who are foregoing the quote unquote smoke or the illusion of what they want and need to live in exchange for the really impactful parts and experiences that let them maximize their lifestyles? And I'd love to get either of your thoughts on that.
Well, Daniel, since I'm, a graduate of the University of Michigan and spent so much time in Ann Arbor, I think I'll take this one.
Okay.
No, it's interesting because I've been thinking myself a lot about Ann Arbor, Michigan, and other college towns like those. And, the attraction for me, and I think the attraction for a lot of people, is that these towns have, cultural amenities and opportunities and work opportunities that you wouldn't normally find in a smaller town, right? You usually find those opportunities in a large city. I mean, this is why you saw that inversion, right? It's, large cities, it's where the action is, it's where the jobs are, it's where the cultural opportunities are, right? And you combine that with the fact that, you need fewer farmers these days to produce, larger amounts of food, and you end up seeing what we're seeing now. And I think, one of the premises for Domos is to offer those types of opportunities in the co-living environment. There's more opportunity to interact with neighbors. I mean, everybody has a story about living in an apartment building for 10 years and literally not knowing who lives next door, or maybe not even having met the person that lives next door. And a lot of people are ready for a different living experience, and co-living provides an opportunity to not just get to know the folks that you might be sharing your 4 or 5 bedroom unit with, but it gives you an opportunity to engage in activities with your neighbors. It could be a movie up on the rooftop. We're going to have a little movie screen on our Rossmore project. It could be meeting down in the gym. We're going to have a beautiful gym in the project. We're also going to have a rooftop pool. It's not going to be Olympic sized, but it's going to be a water feature up on the roof. So we think a lot about the kinds of experiences that we imagine people want when they're living in an urban setting, because everybody needs a break once in a while from that urban setting. And so it's important to provide opportunities for people to take those breaks. And
do you think that the type of person that you're referring to, or your target, I don't know if it's client or who will end up living and experiencing the types of projects that you envision and bring to life? Because it sounds to me, from what I read about you and of what I've researched, there is I get the sense that there is a lot of envisioning beyond just the nuts and bolts in architecture. I get the feeling that you try to understand human behavior and really trying to weave in the experiences into the envisioning. Have you seen, or are you seeing, a shift in what outdoor space means to people, how they want to use it, what they are willing to give up potentially to have more of it, activate it with? Are you seeing a different value proposition on outdoor space? Because the reason I ask is we would often see beautiful luxury, even projects, and the renderings in the billboards show these beautiful common areas and, women and guys sitting on lounge chairs around the pool, sort of in that common area. But yet when you look at that unit's actual balcony, which is often 300 square feet, 400 square feet, the developer or builder typically leaves it as, here you go, it's blank. And they put a lot of time into thinking about kitchen, bathroom, upgrades, appliances, plumbing, and the outdoors is often sort of left as, not really my jam. That's sort of on your own. And we're seeing that start to change. I'd love your thoughts on if you have an impression on that and what you're seeing in your projects.
Well, I'll let Daniel go first, but I'm sure we both have impressions.
We probably have a lot to say. I mean, from my perspective, and I'm interested to hear what Richard has to say, I always would love to provide as much outdoor space as possible. I'd love it if every unit could have a balcony, a personal deck, a place to walk a dog, lay in the sun, and all these things. But unfortunately, in this business, especially within the urban core, you're dealing with, a finite amount of space. And there are only certain amount of things that you can do with that space. So what you try to do is get creative and get imaginative to activate as much of the space as possible. And I think on this particular project that you can see on the picture behind Richard, there are many levels of decks and outdoor space and personal, space, such as balconies and things like that, that are being offered, here. And I think it's done in a very unique way that you don't see, much around the city. You see it mimicked in places like in downtown LA, where you have like these rooftop bars or restaurants that have various patios surrounding them and things like that. And people tend to flock to those spaces. Well, you're going to see spaces like that in this particular asset. Now, when you get in other parts of the country where space is a little more plentiful, we have, there are assets that I've had on multi-acre campuses. You got, 20 or 30 acre campus. Now you're talking about some space. You're talking about, amenities, and the entire campus is, a workout facility. You can jog around it. There's soccer, volleyball, tennis courts, and things like that. It's really a matter of the environment, but it really typically in the urban core in a gateway market such as Los Angeles, in a neighborhood like Hancock Park, space is very, very limited and highly coveted. We try to give as much of it as possible because it's just for me, it's the way I'd want to live, and so I do see that people place a premium on it. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I agree with everything Daniel said, and Ryan, I agree with everything you said. I do think it's always worth talking about where a person or a building or a community is located geographically, right? So, obviously in Los Angeles and also in Atlanta, we're both places are blessed with, pretty good weather. People may argue about whether Atlanta has better weather in LA and vice versa, but reality is we both locations have good weather. And so there's always a premium on being able to get outside, bring the outside in, bring the inside out, that kind of thing. That's been a core, certainly when you look at modernist architecture, that's been a core principle, core concept since the beginning of the modernist movement, particularly in an environment like California. It's been an organizing principle for many, many architects. So, yeah, we place great importance on it. But then to kind of refer back to one of Daniel's points, when you're working with a limited budget, not everybody's going to have a huge private deck. Not everybody's going to have, the grill out there. Not everybody's, you can't give everything to everybody. And one of the advantages to co-living is that, as opposed to an individual traditional apartment, in a co-living environment, maybe you don't step outside your living room right onto this big balcony, but maybe you go out in the hallway, you call a friend and you take a bottle of wine, you walk, 100 feet or something, and you go to the outdoor space where you guys could sit out there and have your wine or, sit by the pool. So you can do in some ways, you can actually do more in a co-living environment than you could in a traditional apartment building, or for sure in a traditional, smaller home, if you will.
It almost starts in some ways to mimic human behavior of being on a vacation. And I'm sure some people, when they're in a hotel room, which is obviously smaller than in most people's, and you get to a vacation, whether it's an all-inclusive or something, and the first day people are a little bit shy, but by the sixth day, you're having dinner with the people you met, and the size of your room, and it doesn't really matter anymore because the common area and the connectivity that has occurred makes the detail of, I wish the bathroom was 8 square feet bigger, seem unnecessary. You kind of forget about it because the connectivity of the experiences outside of where I lay my head down seem much more important than those things that are really not that meaningful in how we actually enjoy and express ourselves.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it's, you're right on the button there. It's what we're trying to accomplish, trying to make those opportunities available to people.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like there's been, for a long time, and I think this is probably from parents' generation, the idea of success was bigger footprint, bigger lot, and the idea that I was going to drive 20 or 30 or 40 minutes to a home in the suburbs where I could live in 5,000 or 6,000 square feet on 2 acres. That was the perceived definition of success. And again, going back into my real estate days, we would, as we were doing our design charrettes, and my role, I'm no urban planner, I'm no architect by any means, but I would go live at projects and hand pick and work with mom and pop operators on designing all the commercial experiences that would bring these projects to life. And I can't remember, I remember working on one in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I remember the average commute time for people driving up to DC was about 2.5 hours each way. and that each morning, Monday to Friday, 65, almost 70% of the city's population would leave. And it would just, people were spending the equivalent of almost a week of time in their cars. And I think that if we can talk about one of the, and there are not a lot of there aren't any silver linings to this pandemic, but do you feel that maybe people's value expectations and maybe defining what is success, is it maybe that I can walk to this or connect with my kids for an extra 2 hours a day because I'm not in my car? Do you think people's psychologies on defining what is truly a definition of success has changed or is in the process of changing in your worlds?
Yeah, Daniel, you want to go first, or you want me to?
Yeah, no, I'll take a whack at it. I mean, I think that's been happening since the Great Recession, probably earlier. You know, people, a generation of people losing homes, losing, retirement and things like that, and their children watching that happen, and now getting out of college and starting out on their own. And prior to that generation, success being defined by the car and the home, and laws being put in place to encourage driving and commuting, and for whatever reason, in sprawl. And so I think that model has been tested, and I think some people are opting out of it, to be honest. If you're trying to create wealth for retirement, you don't have to pay 3 times what the sale price of a house is over 30 years, and get very little return on your money, to retire. Now there are other vehicles to do that, and spend an hour or two one way getting to that place where you're dumping all this money and paying 3 times the sale price of your house over 30 years. People are starting to say, hey, you know what, there's another way to do this. And so experience is one thing, and you also give up a lot of those experiences by trying to do that. And so I think this generation is looking at it like, yes, I do want those experiences now. I want to be nimble. I want to be mobile. I want to earn. I want to have a high earning potential. At the same time, I want to be able to go to different places to take advantage of different opportunities. And so they are looking at it by, they're wanting to have it all, I believe. They want the experience now. At the same time, they want to be able to opt out of that old version of what success was and create their own. And so I see that as what's happening in the future, the way people are structuring their lives and wanting to live.
Completely agree. Richard?
Yeah, Ryan, one of the little jokes that I've been telling or sharing with people or lately, this pandemic related, is, if you ask somebody, hey, are you anxious to get back into the office? Like, nobody's anxious to get back into the office 5 days a week. You might have people that go, yeah, I'd love to go in the office a couple times a week just, to do the collaboration thing. But, it's really hard to find people that go, gosh, I wish I had that daily commute. God, I wish I could sit in that office 8 hours every single day. It's not, I think that is one of the things that the pandemic has shown us. It's shown everybody, hey, there are different ways of living. Now, there's obviously a downside. There's tremendous isolation because of the pandemic. So we're obviously not talking about the isolation as being good. But, it has shown us that there is a different way to work, different way to place yourself so that you're able to work, and different ways to interact, professionally. So I think that stuff is all great, And I also remember how, when we went into that lockdown, how clean the air was, how blue the skies were, and everybody certainly liked that. So it gets you to start to think about, what if people didn't have to spend as much commute time? What if they weren't in their gas, their internal combustion engine car, spewing carbon monoxide all over the place? So it's provided a lot of food for thought, I think.
I want to leave you or ask you with the remaining time that we have one last question. I believe, whether it's in almost every facet of our lives, in particular in what the consumer defines as the type of space they want to live in. I believe there are patterns and cycles to that, as there are in fashion, as there are, bell bottoms will be back in a few years. It's just the way it goes.
Mhm.
And, if you think of the traditional family kitchen and eating environment of the 1950s, 1960s, the Brady Bunch and Leave It to Beaver, the family ate in the dining room each night. There was that sort of picture perfect sort of. And today I think about people's dining rooms and myself for one, as I'm thinking about renovating my own home. I'm like, why do I need a dining room? I literally use it 2 or 3 nights a year.
Yeah.
And I also think about what does that space do in more open environment? My kids, and we eat around the kitchen island. It's where I drink wine with my wife. My kids do their homework. There's been a huge shift in people's use of that type of space. And I also note that if you look at the costs of outdoor space activation on a per square foot basis, it's often one of the lowest, if not the lowest spaces to actually activate if you look at total living space of a home. So if I'm handing you two gentlemen who are far wiser and more experienced than I, a crystal ball, what is the customer or the client of the future 10 years from now? What are they asking for? Is outdoor space different? Are there different relationships? Are they taking it more seriously, making more investments in it? Help me understand what you envision.
We're talking about the United States, right?
Let's say for now, because I think,
keep it in the U.S.
Keep in the U.S. Look, if you look at Europe, you're talking about much smaller footprints and already a greater sense of living and more density anyway.
Brian, that's why I bring it up, because, if you look at other, certainly Western style democracies, I'm not sure how freely we can use the word democracy anymore, but if you look at other Western style democracies, outside of the US, there's no question what the trend is. I mean, the trend is that, living spaces are compressing. They are getting smaller. It's an economic reality. And so to the extent that you could shift resources to provide outdoor space, as a part of your living experience, I think that that's going to happen. I mean, I think it's already happening, and I don't see why or how it would reverse itself. So,
I guess, when it comes down to almost to the economics, and I'll use just a back of napkin example, if you have 100 units to sell at 1,000 square feet, could you sell those 100 units at 925 square feet at the same price if you offered an activated set of experiences outside that made those living feet feel 4 times the size because of what you could do in living there? And from a developer side, do those economics start to make very interesting sense in the way you think about human or behavior?
From my perspective, there is give and take. I prefer to see more innovative ways to build that can bring down the cost of building, so that you can provide more space and not have to offer less space in general. I'd like to offer more space. I know that density is helping. Like, for instance, on our Rossmore project, the fact that we have all these great amenities. I mean, you have a podcast studio going on in this place for people. That's, you just reserve it. You have libraries, you have co-working spaces, you have phone booths that are just soundproof. You can go in and make a phone call, these things like that. Chef's kitchen. You have a 5-bedroom unit, but the kitchen is for a $20,000 a month, apartment. It's just, you don't get those type of finishes, in a 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom apartment unless you're in some really great part of town. And so, people are enjoying that at a price point that's just pretty unbelievable. And so that is the power of density. But at the same time, we don't want to make it seem like, you're not getting your fair share because your place is just undersized. That's not the intent. So there is a balance. And at the same time, what drives us mainly is providing attainable housing, including people. Typically with projects like this, you see a large exodus. You see people being pushed out. We're trying to bring people into these areas that otherwise could not afford to live there. And so that is kind of the trade-off for us in multifamily, rental property. In terms of a for sale product, like you were giving the example about, That's a little different. I mean, I can see it being tempting on a business model to look at a plan and say, hey, we can cut down, 20% square footage and we can make more money, potentially. But we have repeat customers and we like customer retention. And the idea is you have these happy clients in a community that is just thriving. They're better for it, and so is your business plan. And so that's kind of how we do it.
Couldn't agree with you more. There's nothing better than when people bring like-minded people that share their positive experience, and they become your future clients through almost an ambassadorship or a stewardship sort of model. I love it.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. I want to thank you both very much for your time and for your inspiring work. I wish you and your families and everyone around you continued health and safety. And I will continue to follow your work on your website, on your Instagram. And I thank you both very much for your time.
Well, Ryan, we appreciate the opportunity, but Daniel and I both have an ask of you.
Anything.
We've been told that you can help us with our outdoor spaces.
It would be my greatest pleasure. I don't know how much you know about Urban Bonfire, but our philosophy is that we want people to have the same ability to have a canvas for memories and experiences outdoor as they do indoor, and that people should not have to forego aesthetic functionality, design, ease, and those types of things just because they're in an outdoor environment. So we started in the outdoor kitchen business in 2013 in a 400 square foot retail shop in Montreal. And today, everything we do is based on our hopefully soon trademark term of your kitchen outdoors. And in just changing the ordering of those words, we are really trying to create the outdoor central gathering space for people to, as you've talked about earlier, to connect in, whether it's intimate and it's one or two people, or it's familial, or it's 5 or 6 co-living people who come together for an impromptu experience outdoors. Those types of simplistic memories, which are much easier, I believe, to create outdoors. It's more casual by nature. There's less pressure on it. It can be more just come as you are, potluck sort of style. We are doing everything we can to be part of the vision for those types of spaces and places.
Great. Then, awesome. Ryan, Daniel and I will be knocking on your door.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Fireside Chat with Richard Loring and Daniel Alexander of Domos Coliving. I certainly learned a lot about their philosophies on how a home is so much more than just its 4 walls, and how experiences and things that people really need and want in their lives are helping to have them make decisions on where they live and how they live, especially in projects like the 410 North Rossmore project they're actively working on now. We loved having them as guests and thank them for their amazing work in this very needed field. As always, we would love to hear from you. Please join our podcast by subscribing today on Apple. Join our conversation on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And of course, we would love to hear from you on Instagram at Urban Bonfire. Thanks, and until next time, we really appreciate you listening.